I've been working nights with the county sheriff's office for a little over 2 years now. Most shifts are quiet, the usual late-night traffic stops, breaking up a few noisy gatherings, maybe a domestic argument here and there. Where I patrol, serious crime isn't all that common, so nothing too out of the ordinary usually happens. That changed one night when I got a call about a loud scream coming from a residential street not far from my route. At first, I figured it was probably a couple arguing or maybe a group of people outside being too loud. Calls like that usually turn out to be nothing major. When I pulled up to the address, I noticed right away that all the lights were off in the house. I actually had to check my notes twice to make sure I was at the right place. The only sign that someone might be home was a small silver sedan parked in the driveway. I walked to the front door and knocked a few times. No response. After a moment, a man from next door came out and walked over to me. He told me quietly that he was the one who called. He said he'd been in his kitchen when he heard what he described as a scream you don't forget. He mentioned that the woman who lived in that house was usually alone, though he had seen a man visit from time to time. That part stuck with me. It meant there could be more than one person inside. The front door was locked. I made my way along the side of the house, checking each window. Every one of them was shut tight, except for one in the backyard. It was fully slid open, just enough for someone to climb through. That was enough for me to call for backup before going any further. Once I had confirmation they were on the way, I stepped through the open window into what turned out to be the kitchen. I started turning on lights as I went. In real-life police work, you don't sneak around in the dark like in movies. Lighting up a space is safer and lets you see details immediately. I called out, letting anyone inside know I was law enforcement, but my voice just seemed to echo back at me. The first floor was clear. That meant I'd have to check upstairs. I thought about waiting for backup, but I kept picturing what I might find up there, maybe someone hurt and running out of time. I decided to move forward, but unlocked the front door first so other units could get in quickly when they arrived. Climbing the stairs, the carpet muffled my steps. When I reached the halfway point, I could see the second-floor hallway, 4 closed doors. I flipped on the hall light and called out again. No answer. But then I heard it, a soft creak from behind one of the doors to my left. I opened it slowly. It was a bedroom. No light inside, but the hall glow spilled in enough for me to see a figure lying under the covers. From where I stood, I could see the back of a head resting on a pillow. Moving closer, I noticed the far side of the blanket looked darker, soaked. I pulled the covers back and saw a woman, barely conscious, with multiple stab wounds across her side and chest. She was still breathing but weak. I immediately reported it in and asked for urgent medical help and additional backup. But something didn't make sense. That creaking noise I heard earlier, she couldn't have made that sound, not in her condition, which meant someone else was still in the house. I quickly scanned the room. There was a small closet by the wall, empty. Then my eyes went back to the bed. I crouched down, lifted the hanging sheet at the bottom, and found myself face to face with a man. Most of his face was hidden behind a mask. I stepped back and ordered him to show his hands. He slowly raised them, just within the space under the bed. I kept my weapon drawn and ordered him to crawl out slowly, making sure he wasn't holding anything. I stood him in the far corner of the room, hands raised, and kept my distance. There was no way I was going to handcuff him alone in that moment. I didn't know if he had other weapons. When my backup finally arrived, I called to them from upstairs. Only then did I move in and make the arrest. The medics rushed the woman to the hospital. She was badly hurt but survived. Later, we learned the man was her boyfriend. According to investigators, earlier that day, he had found out she'd been involved with one of his friends. There was a heated phone call, during which she ended their relationship. Sometime after, he showed up at her house, and things turned violent. I've handled tense calls before, But this one stays with me for a few reasons. Finding him under that bed, watching his eyes just quietly staring at me, that's the part I think about the most. I was lucky I had backup close by, and even luckier she managed to pull through.
I joined the police force when I was in my early 20s. Back then, I thought I knew what to expect. Action, adrenaline, the kind of chaos you only see in crime shows. In reality, most of the job is routine. You respond to the same types of calls over and over. Noise complaints, minor thefts, the rare domestic fight. There's plenty of paperwork, and some nights feel endless without a single call coming through. But when you've been in law enforcement long enough, you start to notice patterns. One of them is that strange things tend to happen at night, especially in rural areas where help isn't close by. And even though I've seen plenty of weird things on the job, there's one night that has stayed in my mind more than any other. It was a night shift in late summer. The air was thick, still humid from the heat of the day, but cool enough that you could drive with the windows cracked. My patrol area that night was mostly back roads, long stretches of two-lane asphalt framed by endless tree lines. Out here, it's pitch black without headlights. No street lamps, no houses, just miles of silent woods. The radio was quiet. I'd been on the road for almost 2 hours without a single call. I was listening to the low hum of the engine when I caught sight of something unusual far ahead. 2 small red dots glowing faintly off to the right side. At first, I thought it might just be a mailbox reflector or maybe a parked car up a driveway. But as I got closer, I realized it was the dull reflection of vehicle taillights pointed toward the road, only they weren't where they should be. The car was pulled over onto the grass just beyond the pavement, half hidden in the shadows from the trees. The driver's side door was wide open. I slowed down, steering toward the edge of the road. My first thought was that someone's car had broken down and they might have walked into the woods to get help, or maybe they were waiting for roadside assistance. That wouldn't be unusual out here. But before I could even put the cruiser in park, I saw movement. A person stepped out from the open driver's side, just for a second, and then they took off, running hard into the woods. No hesitation, no looking back. That's when my instincts shifted. This wasn't a breakdown. People don't sprint into the trees unless they're hiding something or running from someone. I immediately radioed in the situation, marking it as a suspicious person and vehicle. Then I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out of the cruiser, and kept my other hand close to my holster. The car was quiet now, sitting there with the faint click of cooling metal. I kept my light trained ahead as I approached the driver's side. No one in the front seat, no one slouched over the wheel, but something else hit me right away. The smell. It wasn't the smell of dirt or leaves or anything normal for the outdoors. It was sharp, heavy, rotten. The kind of odor that turns your stomach before your brain can even process what it is. If you've ever smelled decomposition, you never forget it. I called out toward the trees, keeping my voice steady. "Police! Is anyone out there? Do you need help?" Only silence answered me. I stepped a little closer to the tree line, shining the beam of my flashlight into the gaps between branches. Nothing. No movement. No one speaking up. Going back to the vehicle, I leaned in through the open driver door. My light passed over the dashboard and seats before something caught my eye on the backseat floor. Paper towels. Dozens of them. Some crumpled, some laid flat, all stained dark red. They weren't just spotted here and there, they were completely soaked through. The same thing was scattered across the backseat floor. The longer I looked, the more it hit me. This wasn't just a few drops of blood, it was a lot. Far too much for the inside of a random vehicle. I was still processing it when I heard a sound behind me. Footsteps. Not a squirrel, not the wind. Heavy, deliberate steps on dry leaves somewhere in the woods behind the car. I spun around, flashlight up, scanning the tree line. "Come out where I can see you," I called. The beam swung from tree to tree, nothing. Then a voice carried out from the darkness. Low, male. Impossible to make out the words. I took a half step closer to the trees, keeping my light steady. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" I called again. No answer this time, only stillness. There was something about that voice that didn't sit right with me. It didn't strain like someone in pain, and it wasn't pleading for help. It sounded controlled, calm even. And the fact that they'd bolted into the trees the moment they saw my vehicle told me they weren't looking for assistance. I went back to the car and called for immediate backup. While waiting, I gave the vehicle another careful look. That's when I saw it. The license plates were gone completely, not just covered or damaged, removed. That set off a different alarm in my head. Stolen vehicle maybe, used in another crime. I moved around to the rear passenger side for a better search. That's when I found it. On the back seat, tucked between some paper towels, was a heavy bundle wrapped tightly in blood-soaked layers. The shape wasn't immediately obvious. With gloves on, I carefully started peeling the towels back. When I saw what it was, my stomach turned. A human hand. It was almost completely covered in dried, dark blood. The skin underneath was barely visible. The fingers were limp, curved slightly inward. For a moment, I think my mind just refused to process it. Then, just like that, the reality hit. I was holding a severed hand wrapped in bloody paper. This was no longer suspicious. This was a possible murder scene. I radioed in the Discovery, requesting urgent assistance and marking the situation as high priority. This wasn't something you handled alone on a dark road. My cruiser's lights flashed into the night while I kept scanning the area for movement. When backup units arrived, we immediately organized a search of the woods. I expected to find a blood trail leading from the car, but there was nothing. Not a drop. No sign that someone had been injured nearby. That meant one of two things. Either the injured person had been transported from somewhere else, or the hand didn't belong to anyone near the scene at all. Canine units came out to pick up the suspect's scent. The dogs led handlers through the woods for nearly 3 hours, but every trail went cold deep in the forest. Whoever ran into the trees had vanished without a trace. The vehicle was towed and processed for evidence. We learned it had been reported stolen earlier that week from a small town 2 counties over. When we contacted the registered owner, they claimed to have no idea who could have taken it. Fingerprint dusting on the steering wheel and gear shift produced prints, but none matched anyone in our databases. The same thing happened with DNA testing from the severed hand, no match anywhere in the system. Weeks passed without progress. No one came forward, no missing person reports matched our evidence. And without being able to connect the car to any one suspect, the trail just stopped. Even now, years later, I still think about that night, about the person's calm voice in the trees, about the moment they bolted into darkness the second they saw me, and about holding that hand in my gloved palms, knowing it belonged to someone, but having no way of knowing who they were or what had happened to them. Some nights, when I drive along certain back roads, I can almost hear those same slow footsteps in the leaves behind me.
I wasn't supposed to work that night. My wife, Marissa, had been running a fever all day and coughing so hard it hurt to watch. So I told my supervisor I'd take the evening off to stay with her. Around 9:30, I decided to walk to the small all-night grocery store a few blocks away to pick up cold medicine, ginger tea, and some chicken broth so she wouldn't have to eat anything heavy. The air outside was warm and thick, like late summer always is in our town, but calm, quiet in that late evening way that makes even empty streets feel safe. I went out in plain jeans, an old baseball shirt, and sneakers. No badge, no gun, no radio. All my duty gear was sitting in our closet where it wouldn't disturb her rest. The store was only about 6 blocks from our apartment, and I'd walked that route too many times to count. I knew every uneven patch of sidewalk, every porch light still working, and every overgrown yard. Inside, the store was quiet,
lit by the dull hum of fluorescent lights. I paid for the few items, thanked the tired cashier, and stepped back outside. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. Just a heart emoji and thank you. I sent one back, slipped the phone into my pocket, and started the walk home. At first, nothing felt out of place. A late city bus rolled past with a few scattered passengers inside. I crossed one of the main streets where a street lamp flickered weakly but stayed lit. My mind was already home, planning to warm the broth, get her propped up with pillows, and maybe stream an old comedy we both loved. Then I turned onto a narrower street lined with young maple trees. Out here, only 2 of the street lamps worked, and their yellow haze left wide pools of dark between them. Halfway down the block, a van rolled slowly out from an alley ahead. Its headlights were off. It stopped dead in the road, engine idling. I thought maybe the driver had gotten lost or broken down, but then the engine cut off, and with a slow scrape of metal, the side door slid open. Inside, I saw 3 shapes, just silhouettes, darker than the darkness around them. Something in me tensed. I thought about turning and running, but the street felt too narrow. One man stepped silently out of the van. He was thin, dressed in a hooded jacket despite the summer night air. Another followed, heavier, with a cap pulled low over his eyes. The third shape stayed inside for now. The thin man's voice cut through the stillness. "You're Officer Morris, right?" I didn't respond. I was in plain clothes, I could have denied it, but the way he asked made me certain they already knew. Before I could think of a move, I felt a hard object press into my ribs from behind. The third man had closed the distance without me even realizing. "Hands up," the voice behind me said. I slowly raised my hands, the grocery bags rustling as the bottles inside tapped together. Rough plastic zip ties dug into my wrists before I could twist or resist. Then a coarse cloth bag was yanked over my head, shrinking the world into the smell of old fabric and my own warm breath. They shoved me sideways into the van, slid the door shut, and the engine rumbled back to life. The ride felt long, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30. I sat on a hard floor that rattled beneath me like I was over some kind of metal shelving. Loose tools rolled and clanked with each turn. No one spoke the whole time. I tried to keep my muscles loose in case an opportunity came, but the zip ties cut into my wrists and my fingers were already going numb. Then gravel crunched under the tires. Hands grabbed my arms and dragged me into cool, musty air. My feet counted 3 concrete steps, tilting slightly downward. They forced me into a wooden chair, and when the bag was finally pulled off, I found myself in a bare concrete room under a single dangling bulb. A small boarded-up window sat high on one wall. A workbench in the corner was lined with pliers, screwdrivers, and a loop of rope. The 3 men stood in a row facing me. The slim one in the hood, the man in the cap, and the youngest, early 20s, eyes fixed at me like he was memorizing my face. The hooded man crossed his arms and said, "Remember June 9th, Route 17, black sedan, no headlights?" In that moment I did. That night I had been on patrol when a car sped the wrong way down the road toward traffic. I chased it, lights and sirens, but it never slowed. When it swerved toward a family van, I fired one shot through the windshield to stop it. The car skidded into the median. The driver, Jacob Howell, 41, didn't survive. The man in the cap's voice was tight when he said, "He was our father." The youngest stayed silent, but his eyes were wet. The hooded man leaned closer until I could smell wintergreen gum. I was 12, sitting next to him, seatbelt off. "You killed him." I wanted to explain what had led to that night, the robberies his father had committed, the fact that he aimed at innocent people, and that the review board had cleared the shooting, but the words felt useless here. They tied my ankles. Time blurred. Twice a day they came back with a bottle of water and a granola bar, sliding it across the floor. The youngest kept staring, never speaking. The hooded man described their father's funeral in detail. The cap-wearing man asked if I ever dreamed about dying. I never answered. 4 days passed like that. On the 5th, all 3 came in with rope, duct tape, and a shovel. "We're driving you to Black Ridge Forest. "Nobody finds bodies there," the hooded one said. They taped my mouth, tied my ankles again, pulled the bag over my head, and dragged me out to the van. The drive dragged on, maybe an hour, until the scent of pine crept through the bag. Crickets sang somewhere close. They half carried me along a soft trail coated with needles. I heard the man in the cap mutter, "Just leave him for the animals." Then came the unmistakable click of a pistol cocking behind my head. I braced myself. Two sharp cracks exploded in the darkness, but they weren't from the gun at my head. They came from behind us. A voice shouted, "Police, drop it!" The hands gripping me jolted, then let go. My captors scattered into the woods. A knife ripped the bag from my head, and I squinted against the blast of a flashlight. When my eyes adjusted, I saw a face I knew. My old academy partner, Ryan Ellis. His beard was thicker now, but his sharp gray eyes were the same. He shoved me behind a tree, cutting the ties on my wrists, while keeping his weapon trained ahead. "I was camping," he whispered quickly. "Saw 3 guys dragging someone. Took a chance it was you." He radioed for backup. Sirens wailed in the distance. The hooded one froze where he stood. The man in the cap tried to run but didn't get far before a canine took him down. The youngest just dropped to his knees, hands on his head, tears streaking his cheeks. When the squad cars finally punched through the trees with their floodlights, the brothers were cuffed and pulled away. One officer tore the duct tape from my mouth. My cracked lips bled where the glue ripped skin. Paramedics gave me water and cleaned the rope burns on my wrists and ankles. Ellis stayed beside me, repeating in that calm voice, "You're safe now." At the hospital, detectives traced the basement to an abandoned duplex a couple miles away. The chair, ropes, and empty bottles matched exactly. The men were charged with kidnapping, assault, and attempted murder. And because I'd been off duty and unarmed, the law treated it even more seriously. Marissa visited the next afternoon. The fever had broken, though she was still pale. She held my hand and whispered, "You went for tea and came back in an ambulance." I told her I should have driven instead of walked, should have noticed the van sooner. She pressed a finger to my lips and said, "No more what-ifs." Later, Ellis told me he'd been taking a couple days off to fish and hike near the ridge when he spotted 3 men in the hollow below, carrying someone with a bag over their head. "Your walk gave you away," he said, "the way you leaned when your wrists were tied. I just knew it was you." People sometimes ask if I hate those brothers. The truth is complicated. I hate what they tried to do, but I also understand how grief can twist into rage. That understanding, though, doesn't erase the gun pressed to my skull or the hole they planned for me in that forest. They'll spend decades behind bars. I'll spend the rest of my life with faint scars around my wrists and a sharper eye for unlit vans. 2 weeks later, I was back on duty. Now, whether I'm in uniform or not, I carry my sidearm even for quick errands. Every time I pass the store aisle with chicken broth and ginger tea, I think of the bags lying on that dark street as zip ties cut into my wrists. I still buy them for Marissa, even when she's not sick. And sometimes, just before sunset, I drive out to the edge of Black Ridge Forest. I park near the trailhead, listen to the crickets rise, and think about how close I came to disappearing into those trees, and how by pure chance, a friend was in the right place at the right time to pull me back.